2019.
I move to approve the minutes from June 27th.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstained? Motion
I'm
carries.
sorry, I'm withdrawing my approval, because I wasn't here. My note, I'll give you my note from my mother.
One abstention.
It's only
I
excused if you have a
abstained.
doctor.
Okay. Thank you. That was close, Terry. All right, next up would be public comment. Is there anyone in the audience here for public comment? Seeing none, we're going to move on to recognitions. Dr. Carpenter.
I have none today.
All right. Moving on to reports and discussions. First item is the admin summer retreat, advancing the strategic plan. Dr. Carpenter.
I will delegating this one to
Mark.
Mr. Smith.
All right, Mr. Smith, thank you.
Good evening, Mark Smith, Director of Curriculum Instruction and Assessment. The public may or may not be aware, during the last week in June, the administrators got together for our quote-unquote summer retreat to meet and discuss, do planning. And one of the main goals of those days were to look deeply at our strategic plan and to make actionable our strategic plan. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. And I am here to give you a summary of what we did and what some of those outcomes were, and answer any questions as well. So the first thing I want to start with is the misnomer, which is that the summer retreat. I think people get this idea that we are, at the Quasit by the pool, enjoying cocktails. It is none of that. It is a very much a working week. We were very grateful, though, to the town of Chatham, the Chatham Community Center, as they were able to give us a space, because it is important, I think, to break a little bit from your normal day, because it's too easy to get distracted by the normal things if we were just to have had a meeting in our normal central office meeting space. So we were able to get a space in the community center for 4 days that really ended up sort of becoming ours and gave us a great space to do some work. So we're definitely grateful to the town of Chatham and the Chatham Community Center for giving us that space. So what was the main purpose of the meeting? So we had two big, we sort of divided the days into two halves. In the mornings, we were very much focused on the strategic plan. So each day, we took one of the strategic objectives, and I'll get into a little bit more about what we did and how we did it. But the mornings were all focused on the strategic plan and how we were going to address the strategic plan. And then the afternoons, we filled with other things that were pertinent for us. But I'm really here to talk more about the mornings. And the real main purpose of the mornings were for us to look at the strategic plan and to look specifically at things that we could develop common goals that would address all schools. Because not everything in the strategic plan applies to all schools, all positions, all roles. And our real goal was, what can we come out of and develop we kept using sort of this phrase, this laser-like focus. How can we really develop a laser-like focus and give the principals goals that they could then bring back into their school, so that all 4 school improvement plans were aligned and we're all rowing in the same direction. And additionally, what were going to be the common measures that we were all going to use, regardless of school, regardless of department, that we're going to monitor progress on each of the main 4 strategic objectives. So that was that was our big why. It was what was our intent for those 4 mornings. And what we did is we took one each day. So then a little bit about the process. So prior to that meeting, everybody had been given some homework, which was really, the plan's been in place for a while, but I can remember it wasn't that long ago being a principal, how busy your day is and how you're constantly sort of dealing with emergencies and putting out fires. And so each of the principals plus each of us, everybody that was going to be present at that meeting, we were asked to really take some time with the strategic plan and go through it, make some notes for yourself with some guiding questions around really thinking about, where does the strategic plan connect to your role, your function, your job? And to think about those things prior to coming. So then people brought that homework with them, and we had a structure and a protocol. We used the same process each of the 4 days. And my thinking there was that if we had a consistent process that everybody followed, then people weren't thinking so much about the process, and they were actually really able to give some good thinking time to the strategic plan and each of the strategic objectives. So we started with some individual work where everybody then took more time looking at the strategic plan. And again, we narrowed to one objective each day. And then actually even within that, then I was encouraging people just to pick one of the initiatives that best fit their role and their function, with our ultimate goal of coming to consensus. So these were the prompts that we used. So again, we took about 45 minutes in the beginning for people to, and we actually kind of even spread out to other spots in the, kind of took over the community center in a way. People were finding empty rooms all over the place just to have some really good, quiet thinking time with the strategic plan. And really, these were a set of questions that we used every day for people to think about which of the initiatives underneath each of the objectives did they want to focus on, then start to think about what might it look like, again, from a role-centric focus. So if I'm a principal at Chatham Elementary School, what does this look like for me? If I'm the business manager, what does this look like for me? If I'm the special education director, curriculum director, superintendent, et cetera, everybody's looking at it from their particular lens. And started to think about what some specific steps would be that might need to be taken. And then we talked a little bit too about how we might best communicate the steps that we were going to take, and then ultimately what does success look like. Because we recognized that implementation of a goal might look a little bit different in each of our spaces, but we wanted it, the one thing we were going to be solid on is what is going to be the measurement piece, that we were all going to agree on, that was going to be our monitor of success and growth over time. So, following the process, this is a summary of what we came up with. So again, it's not to lose sight of the whole strategic plan, but we're really trying to focus on, because there are elements of the strategic plan that apply to different roles and functions. There's some things that are in there that are very much responsibility of my role, for example. But we were looking for what were things that cut across all the schools, all the departments, that we could continue to carry then forward to. I've mentioned before to this group how we alternate our administrative meetings. One is strategic in nature and one is more tactical in nature, where we're sort of checking off a bunch of items that need to be discussed, but we try to keep one meeting a month that's focused on the strategic plan. So then sort of what were we going to continue to roll forward into next year and beyond. So for strategic objective 1, and again, we're thinking about here, the principals were to them it was very important for them to leave this week feeling like they had something to bring back to their school councils to start conversations around their school improvement plans. What were we all going to focus on? So for each school, one of the actions that they've all agreed on is that each school is going to use, and if you think about strategic objective 1, it's really about reaching out, it's about community engagement, engaging parts of our community that we have yet to be really successful about engaging, underrepresented families and groups that we haven't done as good of a job as we could be doing. So each school is going to hold a meeting with a diverse divided voice. We originally started talking about how could we better serve families, and we ultimately, as the conversation went round and round, we ultimately realized if we want to know how best to serve families, we should be asking the families. So that is one of the main goals is for each school to have a school-focused meeting, and yet with a common set of questions. And you can see those common sets of questions in the sub-bullets up there. That we will, at each of the schools, we will be asking these questions for families, and then using that information to then drive further action steps. But instead of, we kept having this conversation that we were a sort of very monoethnic group. We're a very, as far as the administrative team goes, very monoethnic group. We come from very similar perspectives and backgrounds, and we're trying to understand a group of people that see things differently than we do, and instead of us, from our perspective, trying to figure out how to best meet their needs, it was best for us to ask them. It seems simple now, but it took us a while to get to that place, I think. Another thing that we're going to do in common is expanding cultural proficiency for all staff, and that's a big professional development item, and you'll see that come up under strategic objective 3 as well. And then a common measure that we're going to use is to track family participation at school-wide events. We set on 2 that we'll use in common across all schools, which is curriculum night and parent-teacher conferences. And then schools will have flexibility in picking one other non-academic event. But the idea is we want to make sure that participation mirrors our students. So, for example, give or take a decimal point one way or the other, we are approximately 80% in white and approximately 20% non-white is our sort of the way demographics work out in our district. So you should see a similar representation, right? I mean, if 20% of your families are non-white families, then you should see 20% of your people participating in your events. And if you're not, then we need to ask the question on why, and we want to monitor that growth over time. So then moved into this, so day 2, we started a conversation around the second strategic objective. And so that's very much a social emotional focused goal. And it's big. It covers a lot of different things. And again, we were trying to figure out what would be the common thread that would go across all places. And we were trying to think about what would we message. Because part of this is communication. How do we bring this back to the staff in a way that actually they understand what their responsibilities are? And so the focus is very much going to be, and each of the principals will be bringing back to their schools, and we will be supporting at the district level the power of relationships. Continuing to foster, develop student-staff relationships, administrative-teacher relationships, teacher-to-teacher relationships, and we're going to focus our the way we're going to monitor this growth is around a common survey question, which I know Mark Wilson's presented at the middle school. They use this question in a survey that they give to their students, and we collectively decided we were going to do this K-12. We'll make a slight adjustment to the language using like synonyms that mean the same things for the elementaries because it's a little sort of obtuse, some of the language for elementary age kids, but we won't lose the spirit of the question. And then in addition to that, there is an SEL survey that Melissa started using this past year. She presented the data. It was either the last meeting or the meeting before. And again, that's a very robust survey. It covers like lots and lots of information, but there's a subset within it that focuses on relationship skills. So those are going to be the 2 areas. Again, so the idea is we need some focus. What is it that we're going to monitor longitudinally over time? So those will be the 2 areas that we will monitor growth towards our development of relationships. Third strategic objective is around closing the achievement gaps. And we actually started this day a little bit differently than we had started the other days. And the way we started this day was actually I had worked with Holly Thing to really make some of our data visible for the principals. So when we take certain demographic data, when we get it back from the state, we have smaller number of students in many different subgroups than meets the reporting threshold from the state. So if it's less than 20 students in any subgroup, they won't give you data on it because it's too identifiable. You can figure out who exactly the kid is. So it's sort of, it can be hard to see which groups of kids may you not be serving well. But we do have our own data. And I've been working with Holly this year using a new tool within our Google Suite on how can we manage our own data and get the data that we can't get from the state, because we send all that stuff to them, so we have it. We just need to figure out how to visualize it. So she and I worked together in the weeks leading up to the meeting to really dig into our own data, look at what groups may we not be serving well. And so we actually started that day going through a data protocol where the principals, again, all of us, we went through our own data and started to realize some of the areas and some of the groups of students that we may not be serving as well as we should be. So that conversation actually then led to how are we going to approach this, and we really want to use our own personal data to drive the moral imperative. And we're going to, starting now and going forward, and starting the beginning of the year, we're going to make our data very visible for our teachers. We're going to make it visible for the public so that people can see and we can develop a common moral imperative for different groups of students that we're not or that we are underserving. And you know, they're traditionally underserved groups. You know, not anything that other districts aren't struggling with as well either. You know, Scott and I just came from 3 days at the Mass Superintendent's Conference, and this was a pretty common message across the state. You know, we're not the only ones dealing with this, which is good because we can learn and get support from others. And then you see again sort of this idea of the district level support for cultural proficiency as well. So the data helps us help everybody understand the why we need this, and then we start with layering in how do we address the problem. So one of the particular areas that we're going to start is around cultural proficiency work, which is actually an item that's pretty specifically laid out in the strategic plan already. And then we also started this conversation around how do we help families at a very young age deal with obstacles to access, whether they're perceived or real. And this is something that's really more of a central office focus, but I can see places where it'll definitely make connections into the schools. But we really want to, this is something Scott's particularly passionate about how do we break down those barriers at a very young age and get kids accessing, even maybe before they're into our school district or in the very young ages into our school district, so that they are, connecting into extracurricular activities, building those relationships outside of school that then they can bring into the schools.
Just a quick example, as you were driving in today, did the faces on the baseball field as we were driving in reflect the composition of our classrooms? And I think that we see it early on that, there are some families that aren't taking advantage of what our communities have to offer, and how can we help break that down, get the kids and families more involved early on, and use that engagement to then bolster success on the school side, throughout the years.
And that's obviously requires some partnership with the towns, right? So some of it's stuff that's within our locus of control, and some of that will need some help from others in order to make happen. And then that brings us to the fourth strategic objective, which is a lot around sort of developing this common, I'm going to lose the exact language, but the spirit of the fourth objective is around common expectations for learning, and essentially raising the bar for common expectations for learning. And again, when you dig into it, there's a lot in that particular strategic objective, and quite frankly, a lot of it falls in my department, which is okay. I like a challenge. But again, thinking about where were we going to focus and what we're going to have as a common thread across all 4 schools, we ultimately really settled on this idea of recapturing and reclaiming the professional learning time. And I made the case during the meetings. This is something that the school committee, school district has committed to this time, right? Every other Wednesday, we send the kids home early, shorten their day for professional work. And we really need to focus that time in a way that best serves the district. So what we ultimately have decided to do is to set we're gonna focus this year on curriculum development. And 2, we had a conversation around, we want to make sure that we offer a differentiated approach, because some of our departments, teams, grade levels are in different places. So we're going to utilize the professional learning communities, and we're going to really provide the goals for what we want to happen during those times. And we're going to allow some choice in teams determining where they are, sort of there are 3 different options for them to follow. And it's going to require a little bit of self-reflection on their part about determining where is their team on these 3 tiers, and then selecting the most appropriate tier. So there is a link to the actual language, but essentially it breaks down like this. Option number 1 is for folks that are teaching light courses. So we're all 3rd grade teachers teaching, ELA, or we're 6th grade social studies teachers, or we're 2 or 3 of us are teaching Algebra 1 at the high school, where we're teachers that are teaching like courses. The first is, do we have a scope and sequence that lines what it is we're going to cover from June to September? No, so flip that around, September to June. Have we taken a good look at our standards? Do we have something that we're all 3 of us, all 8 of us, all following? If not, that's our first job, is we need to do this. And I've made this argument and conversation here in front of the board before, but there are more standards to be covered in a year than teachers have to cover. So if they're making individual decisions, then we end up with these gaps, and I've got a whole presentation on that. But we need to get to that common place. Yes, we agree that this unit is the best one to come before this unit, and then these are the standards that are going to get covered here, and this is how we're going to address it. That's layer one. Layer two is then, so what are going to be the common points throughout the course of the year? So if your department has that, or if your team has that, great. So then you move on to option two. Option two is then we need to have 3 or 4 common assessments throughout the course of the year where we agree that this will be how we will measure and monitor student growth towards whatever it is, 3rd grade English, Algebra 1, etc. And then once those are developed, so if you have those developed, then you move on to option 3. And then option 3 is where we really want to ultimately get the PLCs, but understand that some work has to get done between now and then, which is then we administer those common assessments and we follow protocols, which I provide them a bunch of different options depending upon the type of assessment, on actually looking at that data, reflecting on it, making changes either to instruction or to the curriculum, because the ultimate, where the rubber hits the road, is we're in the business of learning. We're not in the business of teaching. So if we need to ultimately see what the kids are learning and then have conversation around that and make adjustments as needed. And that's ultimately where we need to get with our PLCs and into that structure. But we recognize that we're in different places and we need to get everybody to that same place. So that's sort of a differentiated approach depending upon where the teams are. And then so the last thing that came out was really having this common, you know, we've heard of that the high school refers, they've got the slogan sort of the home away from home, right? And we kept, in multiple ways, kept having this conversation that we're not sure we're hearing all of our voices. And even today, the conversation at the superintendent's conference was really focused on student voice and like, are we doing a good job as schools across Massachusetts really engaging student voice in decisions? And I would argue no. And I would pretty much was the consensus across the building, or I mean across the conference. And so whether it's student voice, whether it's underrepresented groups, you know, we need to make sure that everybody has a voice. And so ultimately this is going to be our message and our motto going forward. As a school district that will be common across all of our places, that it will be sort of a larger overarching goal, is that we're going to be working towards making sure that everybody has a voice, whether it's decision making, you know, whether it's providing choice, more choice and options for students to really be engaged in their own learning. It really kind of drives a lot of the underlying 4 messages as well. So that was our week in 10 minutes? I don't know. How long was our week? 26 minutes and 35 seconds according to this.
And counting. Thank you very much, Mr. Smith. Any questions or comments? Joe, I was just gonna say, Joe, I'm shocked. Ms. Straussiello.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Once again, thank you for the presentations. I feel like I learned a great deal about the system I'm supposed to be representing, I am representing, from listening to your reports and commentary. My question is really intended as a footnote for possible future conversation regarding the strategic plan. Our strategic plan, for all the work we did on it, it's not the voice of Allah. It is subject to change. Was there a point in the proceedings where you or others, or there was maybe a consensus, or someone said, wait a minute, something here is a little off? These people who were working last summer, working in a room together, went a little too far. Or conversely, did you feel like there was something that really should have been there and we just overlooked? Because if either of those emerged, we need to know it and think of ways to address it in the future, perhaps in our goals meeting next month.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that there was anything that was really on either of those 2 extremes. What I would say, the common theme throughout the entire week was there was this real energy about how do we actually make this, how do we actually, so that 3 years from now, when we get to the end of this, we can point and say, this is what we did, here's the growth, that we actually have some real laser-like and actionable items that everybody's been working on collectively, and sort of going from, it's understandable by nature, right? So like a strategic plan at the district level has to be kind of broad because it has to cover such a wide umbrella. Then the principals really wanted to know, okay, so what does that mean for, Chatham Elementary, Harwich Elementary, the middle school, the high school? So I think the real focus was on what are we going to all do, and that we're all gonna really be strategic about over the next year plus to make sure we make happen. So it wasn't about this was missing or this needs to go, it's just where are we gonna leverage the power, for lack of a better word, of that group. When you look at the people that are sitting around the table in that meeting, it's everybody who's got direct leadership responsibility in the district, and we should all be moving in the same direction. And it was really focused on making sure that we found that we didn't try to do too much, and we were really in agreement on what it is we were gonna all focus on.
Thank you.
Mark, can you flip to the strategic objective 2 slide? I think this might give you a feel for what the nature of the conversation and sometimes heated debate got to. Strategic objective number 2 deals with improving social emotional learning across the board, but it's such a big umbrella when it comes to social emotional learning. And one of the things that we were trying to be sensitive to as we were looking through each one of these is that one word that we keep hearing from our staff, that overwhelmed piece. And you can imagine if we were trying to hit every aspect of social emotional learning, plus cultural responsivity, plus different academic initiatives in the PLCs, and it has that ability to overwhelm, and we move nothing forward. So we were trying to focus on what's the one piece under social emotional learning. If we do it well, it's going to really help us the most. And and we went back and forth, and really, you've seen Mark Wilson do his presentation of the middle school, and this is the question and activity that they do, where there's a survey asking kids, do they have somebody they're connecting with? Who is that person? And then they're communicating back, to the staff members. These are the kids that are connected to you. The staff members are doing that. So it's a parallel survey. But we thought that that's something that's really powerful that's happening in one of our buildings. It would be good to see that replicated across all. Not that we have Mark come every year and show, hey, this is this neat thing, and we all sit back and say, hey, that's a neat thing that's happening at the middle school. Why aren't we doing it elsewhere? So a lot of it was just trying to hone in on what's the data we're going to collect, and where are those areas of focus that we think most matter. And really when it came to social emotional learning, we said, okay, if we want to do something well, let's focus on the relationship aspect of social emotional learning, and have that be the one thing that, we're not going to overwhelm people. This is the one message we want to have when it comes to social emotional learning. Now let's move on to where we want to focus on other areas in the strategic objective.
The only part that I would add to that is we're looking for, like, what's the biggest leverage lever that we could pull, and this is a great example of it. But we felt if we really focused the conversation around developing relationships and what that means, because then it gets into empathy and it gets into self-regulation, it gets into all the other pieces. That if we focus on that's the, again, I repeat myself, but the biggest leverage lever that we could pull as a district.
So, I really love this. That's really wonderful. I have a couple questions. This that you talk about here, is this year 1 that we're talking about? Okay, because the community piece at the strategic plan talked about changing some curriculum to have more life skills, civics, money fluence, I don't know what you call it, but anyway, a lot of practical skills with money. And I don't see that here. So I just want to make sure, because it's not that I don't think these are good, I think they're fabulous. But I'm just concerned because I don't want to leave that out.
Right, and there's elements of the plan that will move on beyond this. What we're really looking for were the things that, again, were common across all. So if we, for example, well, one, like the civics piece is already work that's being embedded into our work in we have the new standards, and that we're working on curriculum development in social studies right now, and already civics pieces embedded in that K-12. So that work's sort of already underway. And then if we're talking about financial literacy things, it's narrow in that it's kind of falls in my turf and doesn't necessarily have the same broad effect. Again, we were looking for not how do we make every single element of the strategic plan come to life, because there are action steps that fall to different specific people. But what were the things that we were all going to be working on that would be continuous conversations throughout the course of the year?
Thank you.
So I think you answered one of my questions. It seems to me, I know when we were writing the strategic plan, I was sitting there thinking, oh, this is grandiose. There's a lot in there. But you've gone and chosen what you feel is most effective for year number one. Okay.
Yeah, and the part that I would add is, again, some things, like there's one action step in there, which is about the high school examining a service learning component of graduation, right? That just applies to the high school. So it's not really a great use of our time together. It's a conversation Bill Burkhead and I can have, and we can continue, and he can work with his school council, but it's not district-wide. So we're really trying to focus on those things that were going to be district-wide.
And there are things you're doing too, RTI, you're doing it. And then my other comment is just a comment. I am so pleased to see that you have aligned your strategic plan across all the schools with your school improvement plan. And I like that you've got those working together so that everybody's working towards a common good.
And that really came from the principals. They were really looking for, they all wanted to be rowing in the same direction.
That's such a rich piece, and what you're going to end up finding is the teachers will start to have their plans that will fall right into line too, and there you go. Well done, I'm pleased.
Any other questions? Oh, Terry?
Couple of comments. Good job, Mike.
Can I just add one comment? The only thing I would say, I'm just the face. I'm just the guy presenting the work. Like,
Yeah.
I didn't do all the work. The entire team did all the work. I just don't want to get lost in the fact that I
drew
drew
the
the
short
short straw to stand up in front of everybody.
It's a big job.
So I need other people to talk to.
Yeah.
A great overview. You know, it's not often that all of us have a week, a week and a half to say, what have I done this past week? What have I done the last 4 days or weeks? A couple of action steps, and this is just kind of free-flowing. I was very impressed with our 4 parent speakers at our high school graduation. Under Objective 1, and this could be all 4 principals coming up with this, but the thought strikes me, we raise kids up at graduation or wherever else they are identified in their test scores. Kind of a couple of twin thoughts. One, I'd like to see us promote, it would really be Scott and yourself and the administrative team to actuate the idea of 3 or 4 independent meetings during the course of the year where 30 or 20 or 40 parents come together and you guys and women get to know them rather than just depend upon principals. Secondly, years past, a nice experience we had that in the course of the year, all of the 8 or 9 principals were asked to raise up a parent or parents based on their focus and their leadership skills. And they were brought forward to the school committee at the end of the year. And they were thanked by us for whatever skills they brought forward. The principal will tell you what's changed because of Mr. and Mrs. So-and-so. That might be an action step that might be worth looking into, how someone is thanked publicly here. And I guess I already commented on the idea of not just the curriculum nights or parent meetings, but within the schools, but the idea of having 2 or 3 or 4 independent meetings around an open agenda. I think that would be a great way to allow people in good faith to surface as, faithful navigators.
Yeah, and I would agree. I think when we talked about all sorts of different options, we kept coming back to the same place, which was we're having trouble getting sort of a distribution of people to come to those types of events that represent our entire community. So instead of us brainstorming all these different ways, we really want to take as our first step and we believe that at the building level is where the relationships are the strongest. So that at the building level, have that conversation on what is it that's, making it difficult for you to participate, and how do we remove that barrier? So that then we can get to that point that you're describing and have it be effective.
Any other questions, comments? Great job.
Thanks.
Like I said before, I got an opportunity to go and visit with them for just a little bit, but it was great to see them all working together and seem like they're having a good time, so that's always important. So thank you guys very much for putting so much time into that.
It is a great team.
It is a great team. We're very lucky. Next up is Dr. Carpenter with the Family Community Needs Forum.
Oh, it does time your presentation, doesn't it?
Yep. It's for those chatty people like myself.
Dr. Carpenter needs that. Every minute matters with that man.
There's the remote.
You're being timed.
All right, so this is a bit of a reprise of a presentation that I gave, it's all blurring together, Tuesday night. So Tuesday night, we had a community forum where we invited parents and preschool providers and people interested in early childhood ed to come. And I believe it may have been my 3rd or 4th most attended meeting ever, which doesn't say much on some level. I'm a bad judge of crowds, but maybe there was 40 people there. So it was a nice it was a nice turnout. It was a nice mix of people, some some good questions, and in many ways we're kind of coming to the point of sort of a vision that we've been talking about. What can we do with our classroom spaces that we have at the 2 elementary schools, the available classroom spaces, to do good? And so we've been having this conversation for a year now. We're having a meeting next week to provide some, or at least one proposal, if not 2, to the school committee on how we can use those spaces. So this is the presentation I shared with those that came. Which way do I go on this?
It's just my bad. You should be good now.
So I didn't think that many of them might not have seen our slide deck that we had on the Family Community Needs Survey. So I just pulled out of that slides that were pertinent when it came to infant, toddler, and preschool care. So I started with just here's what we've heard from families in our communities out of the 250 some that responded to the survey in terms of adequacy of available infant toddler care in our 2 communities, where 84% of the families are saying that there's not adequate infant toddler options, and in terms of preschool, that 58% of the families were saying that there weren't adequate preschool options for families. I shared with them that that from the survey, what was most glaring was this need that families were saying, both on the infant toddler and on the preschool end, for supports that we call full day, full year. which would be coverage, from, shortly after 7 a.m. to almost 6 p.m. and, going year round, including during the summer months when our schools are closed. And I shared that, we have to sort of acknowledge that our demographics that we serve, almost 1 in 5 families get some sort of government financial assistance. And, so whoever comes in to run a preschool or an infant toddler program in available classroom spaces needs to have some means of accepting, some sort of federal vouchers or state vouchers that, that could help families access the program. And then just, sort of shared, the responses, where we had, in terms of infant toddler, 72% of the families said that the high cost of infant toddler care strains the household budgets. 75% of the preschool families responded the same way to that question. And then 1 in 5 families of infants and toddlers saying that they would use some type of infant toddler care, but they don't because cost is an issue. And 1 in 10 families were saying that they would send their child to a preschool, but cost is an issue and aren't sending them. So we just wanted to kind of say, okay, here's what we're hearing from our families. And then it's the recurring theme, it's how does this link to the school district's strategic plan? So, specifically when it comes to this initiative, it gets under, closing the achievement gap. How can we help children be better ready for kindergarten? We can help them be better ready for kindergarten by expanding opportunities for early childhood learning. So specifically, the initiatives that we have in our strategic plan is to work with community partners to enhance early learning within our towns, to support some type of universal pre-K if we can. And I think that's a bigger picture that, we want to help our communities get there, but this is, that's something beyond what Monomoy as a district can do, but we're at least getting conversations happening in our town when it comes to universal pre-K. What we can do, and what this this presentation and what next week's meeting can clearly do, is look at how we can partner with community organizations to make use of available classroom spaces to expand the opportunities when it comes to either infant toddler care or preschool care for families in our 2 communities. So then I just wanted to share with them, Mark and I were sitting in a meeting Monday morning, I believe, and the Commissioner of Education was talking, and one of his slides talked about this bit of research that came from the Perry Preschool Project, which is a bit of a mouthful with all of those P's. But it really gets at why a K-12 district would go and focus on preschool, toddlers and infants. So the Prairie Preschool Project, just a little history on it, it began in Michigan in 1962, and it started with studying a cohort of 123 black children and gave them a high-quality preschool experience, and then watched how they went and matured over the years to a set of children who didn't have that same preschool experience. So it's now, we're now over 50 years later, and they keep following those children, tracking what the life trajectories have become with with the impact of early intervention. And this really has become the background of why our country invests in Head Start programs, and any type of early intervention is just the outcomes that we're seeing from this. So so if you look at the Prairie Preschool Project and say, okay, the longitudinal history when these individuals were 40 years old, what did early intervention have the potential of doing? And 40 years later, there were fewer teenage pregnancies in those that had preschool. They were more likely to have graduated from high school, more likely to hold a job and have higher earnings, less likely to commit crimes, and more likely to own cars and homes. So a little early intervention, went a long way. This I actually snagged from the commissioner. This was one of the slides that he had on what early intervention did, and it shows that there were differences that you were seeing in the IQs of children just at 5 years of age, and then the homework completion at 15, achievement tests at age 14, the number that graduated from high school, what their earnings were. So so there was lots of advantages that little intervention that happened in preschool had. And I've been throughout the years to different presentations where they talk about it's money well spent, and they went and there's a Rice University paper that I went and grabbed this from, that based on the Prairie Preschool program, but it looks at just where the cost savings were, so that that this 1 year of intervention of preschool cost $15,000 a child, but the benefit or the return on that over the years was over $12.90 for every dollar that was invested in preschool early on. So it had a rather appreciable return on investment. Now, granted, our demographics are different than the Prairie Preschool Project, and on that slide on the cost breakdown, one of the biggest factors was just the expenses, the expense of incarceration. If children down the road get incarcerated, what that cost is. Even if you take that cost out, it's still you still have better bang for the buck. That that there was more than $15,000 of savings happening on the other side. But at the end of the day, it really gets at the fact that high quality early education for kids pays off. And if it pays off for kids that are socioeconomically deprived, it's going to pay off for all kids. So this isn't just can it help kids on that don't have great financial means at home. This is something that benefits all children. So at the end of the day, this is about equity and better outcomes for all. If we just look at our strategic plan and where this dovetails into it, our school district strives to see universal preschool in our towns and is actively seeking to support all families with access to high quality, affordable infant, toddler, and preschool options. In terms of the steps that are happening right now, there's a request for proposals that's out. It's available on the school district's website. If you go under the business finance tab, there's a bid that's out, sort of sub-tab. This is one of the bids that's currently out. So prospective bidders were required to be at Tuesday night's forum to hear from families, and there were, I don't know, 20 some odd questions I think that folks were were asking and sharing their wants and concerns. The proposals are due in next Tuesday, July 16th. They get opened at 2 p.m. on the nose. We have a subgroup that will include Meredith and Joanne and Katie and I that will open those, vet the proposals. By Tuesday evening, this body will get a recommendation by email from us to discuss at next Thursday's school committee meeting, with the goal of having a program or programs starting in available classroom space for September of this coming year. And I don't know if this last slide, but just to kind of wrap even further around, I was yesterday morning at the superintendent's conference that Mark and I were attending. There was this gentleman, Dr. Adolph Brown, who spoke, and his closing slide, it says, "It's personal. Who I am today began with Head Start in a public education," but it's that, and he really his whole shtick was. He was quite entertaining. Is actually an understatement, but he came up to the stage dressed, we'll say, like a stereotypic teenage boy from the hood, and as he was challenging each of us to look in the mirror and sort of take a reflection of what we're seeing in our. And what sort of assumptions we were making about him, and how can we better help students like him. And of course, as the presentation goes on, he transforms and comes out of his outfit, and he puts on his doctoral robes. And but it was quite a moving speaker and experience. So anyway, I'll leave that and leave it for questions.
Any questions or comments for Dr. Carpenter regarding the options for young families? No, looking forward to the update and the bidding. Oh, Sharon?
Yes, when those proposals come out and all, and it goes to Meredith and all, could that be shot to all of us, a copy of that, so we can look at them?
So we can go and share the recommendation with the committee.
At our July 18th meeting?
Right.
Right,
But we can share the recommendation that evening and why, and sort of the details from that.
But why wouldn't we get to see whatever they submitted to the committee?
Do you want to talk the procurement aspects?
So, Katie Isernio, business manager. During the evaluation process, the information is not public. Then when we make the recommendation, we can have the information public.
So if it went to us, that would be considered
It
public?
is.
Okay. So if we want to see it, what time do we need to be there?
We're
wanna
opening
join.
at 2 p.m. And there's a rubric and an evaluation. So this is a little different, if I could jump right in. This is a request for proposal, and a request for proposal is a two-part submission. One is a technical proposal where the potential bidder writes all the programmatic information and gives you all the information. It would be a similar process like when we hired the OPM to do the building. And then a separate envelope is the price proposal. So you evaluate on using the rubric that was a part of the packet. So on a side note, what we can give to you is the RFP, all of the information that we've requested, and then what's private is this, while we're evaluating it. So we'll look at the rubric, and then when we decide upon whom we think is the most responsive and advantageous for the district, then we open the prices and have to hope that, they're both in alignment with our need going forward.
So my comments have nothing to do with the price and all. But when we were in talks with the other group that was supposed to start at Chatham Elementary School, Scott brought everything here, and we had the speaker here, and she presented to us. She told us how many kids would be in each classroom, what ages, all of that. That's what I want to see, because there was a problem. The last group that was here, there was a big problem with that we didn't find out till it made the newspaper.
Right.
So I have great reservations. I think that this is really important to do. I wanted to join the group, but it was being held at 2, which I can't do at 2 o'clock on Tuesday. But I think that a lot of research needs to go into this. It's not just like renting a bus. It's that these are very young kids, and we need to even though we're not going to be supervising directly them, we're, by even renting in the schools, sort of saying to the community, we've got something here that we are backing up.
Which is why we have the evaluation process, the rubric, that your colleagues will be the, part of the team evaluating it. And then we will be making a recommendation and asking the group or groups that we're recommending come to the school committee to do a presentation before the contract's awarded.
Just like we did with Cape Cod Child Development.
I understand, but my concern is that there's a request for us to vote. We're supposed to hear that night and vote that night. I don't want to vote that night on anything that's far less important than the year and safety for all these young children. I want to investigate this a little bit, look into it, Google it, see if I find anything about them. And then I feel good about saying to the people of Chatham and Harwich that would put their children there, that I feel comfortable we've done what we can do. We won't know everything, but at least we've done our due diligence.
What I could just interject is that the hope and desire is that we could have a recommendation on Tuesday, so that perhaps you'd have that opportunity between Tuesday and Thursday to do your own search prior to and come with questions as opposed to after. I don't know, that's just my thought.
Yeah, a day and a half is not going to work for me.
Any other questions or comments? Joe? Just checking. Okay. So as it stands right now, the proposals are due on 16th, and Mary and Joanne will be meeting with Katie and Scott to go over that and do the evaluation, and then the recommendation will come to the subcommittee on Thursday, the 18th, looking for a vote, as it's a timely, and our hope is that we will get some bids, and our hope is that between Tuesday and Thursday, everyone has everything they need to go over all the information that's provided, and certainly come prepared to the meeting with questions and concerns, because that would be a great opportunity to do that. All right, and moving on, year-end food service debt.
Again, Katie Ashton, your business manager. This is the all of the votes and the approvals that we get at the end of the year. We're busily closing out FY19. So the first is there's some uncollected balances in our food service account, and per the federal and state guidelines, the food service program can't absorb that the general fund needs to fund that. So this year, we have $3,390.78 in uncollected lunch program, breakfast program monies. It's just about $70 more than last year.
I was going to ask that.
Just about the same amount. We cover the debt, and then we continue to reach out to families to see if we can collect those monies. There are a lot of different reasons why there are debts, and some of it has to do with changes in life circumstances, and perhaps somebody now is eligible to be free or reduced, but it can't go retroactive. So any kind of deficit that was built up remains. So that is one of the votes that I need to have a vote to approve funding from the general fund, $3,390.78 to cover the deficit in the food service program.
Do you want to do all three and then we'll vote, or do you want to do one at a time?
Whatever, I'll leave it up to the group.
Do I have a motion to approve the year-end food service debt?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Year-end regional transportation.
So if you recall, in FY15, there was legislation that was enacted that we could create a regional transportation account for any monies that we receive beyond what we budget for regional transportation. And then we vote to use that monies to offset, it's actually 2 years out, so the monies would be used to offset FY21's transportation assessment to the two towns. So we got $128,948 in regional transportation aid, including our homeless reimbursements, beyond what we had budgeted. So what I'm requesting is a vote that we would use the $128,948 to offset the FY '21 assessment to the two towns for transportation.
Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
I would second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. And year-end encumbrances.
Okay, so, these unfortunately, because we were cranking out invoices, excuse me, did those get put in the packets? Okay. So I want to just take a minute, please, if you will indulge me. It's hard to believe this is the end of our 7th fiscal year. We keep saying, to me, I would think maybe 4 or 5, but it's 7. And I want to just to take a page out of Bill Burkhead's playbook, a shark shout out to the business office staff. I think Leah can attest, she was in that seat last year, and we have over a $40 million budget, and I'm presenting to you $65,724.96 in unpaid invoices that we just can't close out this fiscal year that we are encumbering, which is, I think it's, pretty impressive, if I do say so myself. And I can't thank Leanne and Eileen and the staff across the hall and the superintendent's office for understanding the importance of closing out a fiscal year. So what you have in front of you is a motion for the general fund encumbrances, and there's only $1,500 in invoices. Some of it has to do with it. Something might be on back order, or there's some, you'll notice there's some classes that teachers have taken, but because we haven't gotten the transcripts and things, we can't close out and we can't pay. And this is the last, July 15th is the last day you can close out and do anything related to the prior fiscal year. So that was one of the reasons for the urgency of tonight's meeting. So as I said, a shout out to the business office staff. So you have in front of you the motion for and the listing of all of the detail of what those invoices are, totaling $65,724.96 in general fund encumbrances and $1,518.73 in grant-funded encumbrances.
Thank you, Katie. Is there a motion to approve? Nancy?
I move to approve the following FY19 encumbrances for unpaid FY19 invoices as presented: $65,724.96 in general fund encumbrances and $1,518.73 in grant-funded encumbrances.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any abstentions? Okay, motion carries.
Also, what was sent to you, just a point of year-end discussion, is I provided the year-to-date expenditures through June 30th, unaudited, of the expenditures and encumbrances. And at this point in time, we ended the year with $472,266 unencumbered and unexpended. Attached to the financials, I did do a narrative. One of the reasons for additional money than what I had anticipated is we did receive just over $100,000 in additional circuit breaker money for some that had to be used in the current fiscal year. And we also had a position at the middle school that was never filled all year for a school psychologist, I think it was. So a couple of kind of big ticket items that kind of drove that. So that number is, draft, subject to change. It will be finalized once the auditors come the last week in July. And then those are the funds that then go towards our E&D. And if you recall, we're using $550,000 of E&D in the current fiscal year to support the budget. So it's kind of a nice result.
Great, thank you, Katie. Any other questions for Katie?
Can I just quick comment? Thank you very much for the narrative.
Oh, you're
Yes.
welcome.
Very helpful to, instead of going back and forth. Thank you.
You're welcome.
FY20 new technology leases.
Back again. All of this information was discussed and presented and provided when we did our FY20 budget on Chromebooks that we need, teacher laptops, switching out some of the whiteboards or smart, well, I don't think they're smart, whiteboards,
Yeah.
thank you, and getting the Promethean boards. So one of the things that we've done and committed to as a district is we've been entering into leases so that our technology can remain current, and we swap them out at the end of 3 years so that we don't end up with 400 Chromebooks at the end of 5 years that sit and that outlive their lives, so we rotate them. So using their state contract pricing, so I went out and solicited quotes from various companies for the price of the laptops and the Chromebooks and the graphics lab at the high school and the Promethean boards. So then we got the pricing, and the most favorable pricing was from Wally for all of the purchases except for the Apple graphics lab. And then on another level, we have a state contract that we use for the leases. And so I send out this pricing information, and then we get the pricing from the different leasing companies. And in the far right column was the lowest responder, which was Hewlett-Packard, and those are the dollar amounts. This is not requiring a vote tonight. I know you're seeing it for the first time. We can vote on it next week, but then we just want to get the things ordered so that we'll be up and running on the first day of school. So, as I said, it was all in the budget. It's all what we assess under the capital improvement to our 2 towns, listing out these different activities that we were planning to do. And Jim Birchfield, another shark shout out, has this spreadsheet that's unbelievable that has the rotation of, the class of 2032, and all the way down, rotating out the Chromebooks so we know how many we need, and with the teacher laptops to rotate them out. So it's pretty impressive. So digest this. If you have any questions about this, I think I provided the quote information behind it. So certainly ask me any questions that you have. Okay?
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, and the last action item is the Howard Elementary School 2019-2020 Student Parent Handbook, the final draft as presented at our June 27th meeting. Do I have a motion to approve?
I move to approve the Harwich Elementary, sorry, Madam Chair.
Ms. Scott?
I move to approve the Harwich Elementary 1920 Student Parent Handbook as presented at our last meeting.
Second? Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any abstentions? Motion carries. And I believe, oh, look at me going right over subcommittee reports. Woo, any subcommittee reports tonight? Seeing none, superintendent's report. Seeing none.
Every minute counts.
Dr. Carpenter?
I think I covered my
Oh,
comments in what I was presenting on the forum this past Tuesday.
oh,
Move on.
okay. Any other surprises? Nope, we're good. All right, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Adjourn. 7:39.